be delighted to speak to this report. Madam Acting Deputy President, it's been months in the making. I'd also like to add my thanks to Senator Lazarus and his staff. I've only chaired a handful of committees in my time here, and it can be hard work, particularly with the kind of extraordinary displays of petulance that we saw, which actually did go some way towards spoiling some of the hearings, but nonetheless it was actually a remarkable experience and unlike any committee work that I've done before. It has been months in the works, and it's actually a really rare thing. We saw it again today, not that long ago actually, with Senator Whish-Wilson's motion for an inquiry into the procurement of the Joint Strike Fighter. But it's a really rare event that unites the opposition Australian Labor Party, the Australian Greens and all 8 of the crossbenchers in all of their glorious diversity. This was one of those things that united everybody against an extraordinary decision announced to the head of the Australia Council during the afternoon on Budget Day by mobile phone call from Senator George Brandis, who effectively threw himself and the entire arts community under a bus. He was rewarded for that extraordinary intervention by losing the portfolio, one of the lesser heralded but I would say more important portfolio reshuffle decisions that incoming Prime Minister Malcolm Turnbull made. Senator MacDonald, when the coalition can only be bothered to send Senator MacDonald in to defend an utterly debacular policy, then you know that something is really seriously amiss. And he did them proud. If anybody out there, outside this building, listening in, wondering what this debate is all about and how the government could possibly have got arts policy so desperately wrong, do yourselves a favour and download the video or check the Hansard transcript for what Senator Ian MacDonald just put on the record about 20 minutes ago. This is an individual who uniquely combines aggression with total cluelessness, unlike anybody else in this chamber that I'm aware of. And if you want to know just how badly the government got it wrong, watch Senator MacDonald's humiliating rant, and Senator Lazarus was too polite to name him, but behaving like an unhinged and tantrum-prone 5-year-old in a way that reduced one witness to tears and forced the chair's hand on a number of occasions. And I don't use words as strongly as this against individuals very often in this place. I don't know what the Queensland LNP has on their minds. Insulting the entire arts community of this country, who put in a spirited defence of themselves and the institutions that they've helped create over decades of establishing an arm's-length, peer-reviewed Commonwealth funding body for arts funding. And it's not like there are hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars of funds washing around for the arts community. But the Free the Arts campaign, those from Feral Arts and others who kind of played a bit of an informal convening role, absolutely did the arts community proud. So let's talk briefly about the report that was handed down. It's not a unanimous report. People who've been following this issue wouldn't be surprised to know that the coalition has provided a bit of a half-hearted rearguard defence of Senator Brandis's policy, but actually I don't think there's a single person in this building, maybe Senator MacDonald aside, who really believes that this was a good idea. It wasn't a good idea. Ripping $100 million out of a pretty cash-strapped entity that has developed painstaking ways of dispersing that money to where the peers in the artistic community believe it should go, just rocking up without any warning, any consultation at all, and ripping such a huge amount of money out of there and throwing it into a government slush fund was never going to be received particularly well. So the essence of the recommendations, those recommendations by the opposition, the Australian Greens and the crossbenchers who participated, effectively go to the fact that, look, by all means, if you want this new entity, knock yourselves out. We don't understand it. We think the guidelines should be dramatically improved if you keep it. But if you insist on keeping this new thing that we're now apparently having to call Catalyst, fund it from somewhere else. Find the money from somewhere else. Maybe you could just cancel out the Joint Strike Fighter procurement while that one's on our minds and on the minds of the chamber today. We don't even mind where you get the money. Find the money from somewhere else. But actually, the closest that I think we got to unanimity among the witnesses who presented was we don't need this thing at all. Is it set up to compete with the Australia Council, this new Catalyst entity, or is it set up to complement it? If it's set up to compete, we just don't need it. If it's set up to complement it, why are the guidelines so muddy? And who asked for this thing? So actually, I think most of the witnesses and most of the arts community from one side of this country to another just would rather that we pretended this thing had never happened. Just stand it down and return the funds to the Australia Council. And that's really the essence of the recommendations that we're presenting the Parliament with today. That if you can't find the money, and this to the Finance Minister, I suppose, if you can't find the money to fund this bizarre experiment, then just stand it down and we'll forget that it ever happened. I suspect Senator Fifield, who was thrown a bit of a hospital pass by the outgoing minister and by Minister Malcolm Turnbull, to his credit, Senator Fifield got to step in after the key decision had already been made to establish it, and I guess for face-saving points of view, maybe Senator Fifield felt that he couldn't cash out entirely. But what that means is that we're left with this rather awkward position of an entity that's had, I think, about a third of the funding stripped away from it. That third of the money has been quietly passed back to the Australia Council so that it can get on with its work. But of course, as the forthcoming budget rolls around, as Expenditure Review Committee cranks into gear, the arts community and we on this side of the chamber, the crossbench and the opposition parties in this place know that Senator Fifield blinked. He could actually have fixed this and he chose not to. Either find the money from somewhere else or stand this entity down and put the money back into the Australia Council. So this isn't over. Senator Billick put it, I thought, quite adeptly a short time ago. This is indeed a catalyst. It's a catalyst for further action, further advocacy until we get this fixed. That money needs to go back to the Australia Council so that it can get on with the work that it's doing. I think one of the main benefits, and I spoke on this briefly I think last week, of being drawn through a process such as the one that we were just drawn through, is that it kind of shows the arts community who it is. They probably could have done without it. They'd have probably rather been out there making art and getting the grant applications in and getting on with the kind of work that people love to do. But nonetheless, people really did step up. The community and the sector did step up. And now we have, I think, a much better idea of the shape of the community, of the way that it regards the Australia Council, and I think it's worth noting on the way through that the Australia Council, it wasn't completely immune from criticism, but it was actually, it received warm accolades everywhere we went. Everywhere we asked the question, how do you think AusCo is doing? It doesn't have unlimited money, it can't fund everything, but what do you think of its processes for dispersal of scarce Commonwealth funds? And people came to the party and acknowledged that actually the former government, let's give them their due, got it right. In the guidelines that were just passed, in the new proposals for 6-year funding rounds, in the way the peer review process is structured and the kind of stuff that gets funded, mostly they get it right. And it's actually rare to hear that degree of applaud and accolade for a Commonwealth government entity, actually. So that was one thing that I personally found quite a valuable insight. So we know as the budget cycle rolls towards next May, this is still an open question. This is unfinished business. I think Senator Fifield's up to it. He's not an arrogant individual, and I think as he starts to come to grips with the portfolio, he's going to realise that the path of least resistance, but the path of greatest policy integrity, and certainly the politically smartest path, is going to be to restore the money to the Australia Council. And maybe we'll make some kind of little sculptural object. We could probably get the arts community to throw in for some little token, some little sculptural reminder of this ridiculous experiment imposed by Senator George Brandis on the arts community. We can put it up, gift that to the minister as a reminder to future Australian governments that if something isn't broken, don't attempt to fix it. I thank the chamber.